Hi, I'm Ryan Payne with Garage Gurus, and today I have a tech tip for you on cleaning brake caliper brackets. So if you take a look at this one and take a look at the pad I have here, I'm actually not replacing the brake pads on this vehicle today. We were doing some other work on the right front that required this caliper bracket, or caliper and caliper bracket, to be removed. So this procedure that I'm going to show you, we see a lot not being done, right? Whenever we're in the shop, we're replacing a strut or whatever it may be, and we have this stuff apart. This goes overlooked. But we also see it when new brake pads are being installed, or calipers are being replaced, or rotors are being replaced, that this job just doesn't seem to get done correctly. And it's something that doesn't take a whole lot of time, but it will save you later on in comebacks because of noises, squeaking or grinding, or calipers that are hung up. So I'm going to show you real quick. Obviously I have my bracket. It's already taken off the vehicle. So one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully pop these abutment clips off, and I'm going to kind of keep them in the same order so it's easier when I go back together with them to know where they go. Now these brakes, you can kind of tell by the pad that I showed you, haven't been on there that long, so these shouldn't be too bad, but it's still a process you want to go through just to make sure you don't run into any problems. So the first thing I'll do is inspect in here, and these don't look too bad, but I still just want to be sure that I don't have any issues. So there's a little bit of grease there, which is good. It tells me whoever was in here before and did this brake job, they did a pretty good job at getting them cleaned up and applying grease, which I'll get to later on here. So I'm going to take these once again, just wipe the grease out so I can get a good look at it. And what I'm looking for is any rust in there, which these are pretty clean, but the other thing I'm looking for is bigger burrs that might be in there from somebody may have hit it with a hammer, or it was dropped for whatever reason. You know, if I have one of those, I might use a small file like this to get in there, make sure that burr is gone. And once I'm sure there's nothing like that in there, I'm gonna grab a good old, scrub brush, a steel tipped or steel bristle brush, and I'll just start scrubbing in here. These aren't too bad, so I can get to work in here and just hit them real well. I want to make sure that I don't leave any rust in here at all, because remember, any rust or corrosion that builds up in here takes up space, doesn't allow these abutment clips to sit properly, and then once I put the pads in there, now they're actually tighter than they should be and may cause them not to slide properly. So if you get one that's really bad, like I said, this one's not too bad, we may end up running into something like an air tool to get in there to really get it out. Now, if I'm going to get a tool like this, I better get my safety glasses out to run this. But with this one, once again, I can stick with this scrub brush, and I'll get to it. I won't bore you with taking this thing the whole time and scrubbing it down. So I'm going to show you one more thing before I really get to scrubbing this. But I want to make sure these slide pins move nice and easy. And once again, these look like new boots. So whoever did it, like I said, did a really good job. But I want to still inspect them and make sure I don't see any corrosion in there. So one thing I want to do, I've run into this, I've done it myself several times. If you've noticed, if you've done this long enough, you see that where they're putting a bushing, like an anti-rattle bushing on one side or the other. So it's always good to take a grease marker or something and mark one of them. That way you know where it came from. To make sure you get that bushing back in the same spot, because sometimes they will fit either way. So I'll pop these out here and take a look, and there you go. So there's a bushing on that one. And that one looks pretty good. I can probably just put some grease on that one. We'll show you that later. I'll pop this one out, make sure it looks good. Try not to damage the boots there. That one looks really good as well. I don't see any corrosion. Like I said, this was serviced, but this is just a precautionary to make sure we don't run into any problems down the road, even though we didn't actually do the brakes, but we did touch them, we did have them apart. So this one looks good. So I'm going to get in here and scrub this thing down really well. Like I said, I won't bore you with all that, but I'll be right back once I get it totally scrubbed down. All right, so to save a little time, I got my air tool out here while I was off camera and got this thing cleaned up really well, and you can take a look at it. I got all the old grease out of there, made sure there's no rust, cleaned out the holes there that my slide pins go in. You can see those. All the old grease is gone. Everything is good to go. Same thing with the abutment clips. Really just had some old grease on there that had some debris that accumulates in it. So just use a little brake clean and got those cleaned up. So let's show you the process of putting this back together. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'll lube these slide pins up. So remember, I marked these things. There's my yellow mark there. This one does not have the yellow mark on it, so I know it goes on this side. So we're going to make sure we use a real good, high temperature brake specific grease for this process, because anything that's not high temperature, we are working on a brake system, so if it starts to melt, now we get runny oil basically as it breaks down, running all over the place. So good high temperature lubricant works really well. So you don't need to do too much. You get too much in there. Some of these don't have a vent hole in them, so as you run the pin in there, it'll actually hydraulically lock in there. So it doesn't take much. So be real careful, get it about down in there. And yeah, I want to make sure that boot seals against that pin and make sure it moves really well. And I see that one's good to go. So we'll grab this next one. There's my yellow mark. I don't know how well it picks up for you, but there's my yellow mark. Same thing here. Some of my high temp brake lubricant, and just put a little bit on there. Now you'll know if you've ever done this before and had one of these that had a rubber style bushing on the pin, if the tech before you used a if they use a petroleum based grease, you may never get this back in that hole because this boot is swollen up so much. So like I said, just make sure you're using the right stuff. Same thing here. We'll slide that in, make sure it goes in there nice. My boot just hooked back on. Make sure it slides really well, and it does. And that's the reason why it's pushing back out, is because it is a little tight in there. Sometimes you may have to pop the boot loose just a little bit to let a little air out so it settles, but I'm good with that right there. Now, the next step. Some people, when you teach them this, they're wondering what you're doing, if they see you do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to apply some of this brake lubricant to this caliper where I just cleaned. And the reason I'm going to do that is if I add just a little bit, now I'm not talking about a lot. Unfortunately, in this industry, we're pretty bad about, if a little bit's good, a lot's better. In this case, that's not true. We get too much grease in here, we're going to end up with a mess. It may end up getting on your rotor and contaminating the pad. So it doesn't take a whole lot, but the purpose of it is to actually shield this area from the outside air. And by doing that, we prevent the oxidation or the rust process from even happening. So it doesn't take a whole lot. I'll just grab my brush here. Like I said, it's a very, very light coating that needs to go in here just to be sure it's shielded from the air where we don't get any rust. And we'll do this in all 4 of these corners. Doesn't take a whole lot. May have to dab my brush one more time. We get that all there. That side's good. Get a little more lubricant on my brush here. Flip it around and we'll do this other side. Same thing over here, just a real light coating on all the areas. Like I said, we're just preventing the ambient air from being able to get to these surfaces, and it helps to prevent that oxidation process from ever occurring, so we don't have to worry about rust jacking underneath these abutment clips. So I'm happy with that there. Now the one thing I'll do before I move on, I'll actually take my rag and I'm going to go in the middle and I'm going to wipe this down in the center. And what I'm doing there is just making it to where if I get a little clumsy when I go to put this back on, I don't get any of that lubricant that may have kind of oozed over there in the center. None of that gets on the rotor, so it just makes it a little easier. I don't have to worry about any brake pad contamination. All right, so I'm good there. All my surfaces have some grease on them to prevent that rust. So now we'll put these back in how they belong. And I've made sure, you got to be careful with these things. Like I said, I'm not doing a brake job here, so I don't have new ones. I just did some work on the front end of this car, but I had this apart, I disturbed it, so I want to make sure I do a good job here. So I don't have new ones. I've been really careful to get them cleaned up nicely, but also not to bend them up. Sometimes you see these things that get bent real bad, and they can be a bear to get back onto the caliper bracket. So should be no problem here. That one snaps in nicely. We'll go to this next one, do the same thing. Like I said, I've kind of kept them in order here, so it should be really easy to get these things back together how they belong. Get this one, and then we'll get our last one snapped in. Like that. All right, and there we go. And then the last step I'll do here that you could do is apply lubricant to the abutment clips where the brake pads are going to go. But I always recommend to put it straight to the pad itself, simply because you use a little less lube there because you know exactly what spots you got to hit. So this thing now, I know I'm clean, I'm lubed how it should be, and I'm going to really help prevent any possible comebacks because of noise or growling, squeaking, or any sort of caliper hanging up in the bracket because it doesn't slide properly. So hopefully you picked something up from this tech tip. If nothing else, just the importance of, even though you may not be replacing the brake pads here, but you've had it apart, the importance of getting this thing clean and lubricated. And like I said in the beginning, follow the same process for when you're replacing brake pads, and that will really help prevent those brake comebacks because of noise or caliper sticking in one position. So for more videos like this, hit that subscribe button. If you like the video, smash the thumbs up. For more information on Garage Gurus, visit us at garagegurus.tech. I'm Ryan Payne for Garage Gurus. Make it a good one.